Is tutoring easy money? Well, what do people actually mean by easy money? To answer that, the first thing we need to do is define what easy money actually is. So, does tutoring involve heavy lifting or long hours working in the sun? No. Does it involve life or death decisions? Again, no. But that doesn't mean it's actually easy. There's often more involved than people actually realize. The idea that anyone can just pick it up in a quick way and earn some extra income actually misses the mark. So, like everything else, there are those who put their heart and soul into tutoring, and there are those who will do the bare minimum but still expect the biggest reward. Is £30 an hour fair for just chatting, or is that misleading? Early on in my tutoring journey, I had more work than I was able to handle myself. So I started finding other tutors and referring them on to help the families that I wasn't able to help myself. And this one tutor had mentioned that he could support economics. And at the time, my son was doing his A levels and had missed an important lesson just before an economics test. So I arranged for this tutor to come by and cover the missed material. He charged £50 an hour plus transport. And just to put that into context, at the same time, I was charging £20 an hour, and that included transport and all the resources and everything. And he turned up with just the pen. And he said to Jamie, my lad, what would you like to focus on? And Jamie explained. Then he said to Jay, okay, what do you know about it? And Jamie said, well, nothing. I missed that lesson, which is basically why you're here. He said, well, you must know something. So what is it that you know about it? And Jamie repeated that he missed the lesson, so he didn't know anything about it. And this went back and forth like a tennis match for the full hour. And when the session ended, Jamie had learnt nothing. I was financially quite a bit worse off and completely confused about what had just happened, because I always put my heart and soul into preparing for the lessons. I show up with carefully chosen resources tailored to students' needs based on what the family have told me that they want. Yet he was charging more than double what we were charging, and he'd done no preparation or anything. He'd literally just turned up with a pen. When I spoke to him about it afterwards, he simply said, well, no one's ever complained about it before. And I just wanted to scream at him that, well, I am now, but what would that actually achieve? So I never recommended him again. And to my knowledge, neither did anyone else that I'd originally referred him to. And this might be how some tutors work, but what I would want you to think about is how long can your business actually ask if you're not putting any effort into it, and if you're charging more than what other people are charging who are putting the effort into it. How are you going to build up recommendations or testimonials? And will the next family that are actually looking for help phone that person who is not putting in the effort? So what is the truth behind the hourly rate? Well, that really depends. Yes, some tutors will turn up with no preparation, and that might work for them, like I say, in the short term, especially if the family has never worked with a tutor before, and so they have no expectations. But most professional committed tutors will put their time and effort in behind the scenes. For example, I always check to see whether there's any specific requests for the next lesson. I plan the sessions carefully these days, although it's often in my head while driving or swimming or something, because that's when I'm mostly creative. But when I started, I wrote down an actual learning plan and I gave that to the family in advance so that if there were any issues, they could come back to me prior to the lesson, even if it was just something like, yep, that's fine, but the child's moved on. And so do you mind covering this instead? But I will always prepare more than what we're actually likely to need, especially at the start when I'm still getting to know that individual child and what resources will work best for them. And when I first began tutoring, I took it to extremes. I personalized every single resource. So if your child said they liked trains or fairies or something, and we were playing a pairs game, on the back of each card, it would have, say, a picture of a train or a picture of a fairy. And some lessons could take me up to 4 hours to prepare. And although I'm less precious about doing things to the finest little detail about that now, so I don't, if we're playing a card game, a pairs game, I won't put kind of like the images on the back because then they can only be used that once for that child. But if we're doing something creative, or writing stories, or I need an analogy or something, it will always focus onto the child's particular interest. Or even if we're playing something like the Dotty board game, instead of just having a generic board, we can tailor it so that it involves images which are relevant to the child's interests. So is tutoring easy money? For some, yes, possibly. But those who actually care deeply and want to make a real difference, then there's a lot more to it than just turning up. What are the costs and efforts involved? Well, this is often relative and will depend on whether your lessons are online or in person. And it's fair to say that most of the cost for tutoring is time, while in-person lessons often involve both time and money. So what goes into preparing a lesson? One, you have to decide what the lesson is going to focus on, and then you're going to need to think about the resources which will be relevant to that child. Some, especially those nearing exams, prefer just to work through past papers and so that they can build familiarity with the format, and that's fine, that's quite easy. But then you also need to work out which resources you're going to need to make from scratch, which you already have and just need to tweak, and whether there's some you can literally just pick up and go. And then if it's an online lesson, you need to make sure that you've sent the link to the family. And what I normally do is at the same time as sending the link, just make sure that whether they've got any specific requests or anything. And something else you need to think about is when you're actually delivering that lesson, make sure there's nothing on the screen which is personal or unprofessional, such as kind of like I don't know, bank details or something like that, or addresses or something. So, and the other thing is, if you're going to an in-person lesson, you're going to need to print out all the resources, pack everything into some sort of folder or bag, and you're also probably going to need to take with you the stationery that you and tools that you might need, such as pens, paper, rulers, calculators, dice counters, etc., if relevant. So there is a substantial amount of preparation goes into preparing for each and every lesson. So travel time, resource creation, emotional energy, what's not actually seen above tutoring. Even though I don't create physical lesson plans or personalize every single resource these days for every child, it can still take between 30 minutes to an hour to prepare a single lesson. So that £30 per hour might actually look closer to £20 by the time your preparation time is factored in and you haven't actually even left the house yet. So, and then what you'll often find is you'll get messages from parents at 10 o'clock at night asking for a tutor, or a Sunday lunchtime, just as you've sat down to the family meal, you'll get a text, or 7:30 on the weekend morning, you get the message. A couple of years ago, I went on holiday to visit my son, who was living in Indonesia at the time, and a mum messaged to say that she was looking for an English tutor for her daughter and that I'd come as recommended. So I replied and just said, hi, I'm on holiday visiting my son at the moment. I don't have my diary, I don't have my laptop with me, but I'll be in touch as soon as I get back. And so she messaged again, said that her daughter was in year 11 preparing for her GCSEs. So I acknowledged the message and kind of said, look, thanks for the details, but I'll be in touch when I get back to the UK. So she then messaged and said, okay, we live in Leicestershire. So I explained that we were in Buckinghamshire, so we'd probably have to focus on online lessons. And I repeated that I'd be in touch when I got home. And then she started asking about prices and availability. And by that point, I was kind of like getting annoyed because I was there to spend time with my son, not to be focusing on work. And I'd already explained that I didn't have my laptop or diary or anything with me. And I was visiting my son, and it'd been 6 months since I'd seen him. And although I felt bad ignoring her next few messages, and I didn't want to appear rude, but time with my son was more important to me than sorting out her initial inquiry. So this is the sort of thing that people don't see. It's not just about the time you spend delivering the actual lessons. There are constant messages, cancellations, updates about what their child's working on. They're not updating you about what their child's working on, so you're just having to turn up blind. And then you have to spend time chasing payments, sometimes in advance, sometimes after the lesson. Some families are fantastic, but there are a few who will stretch your patience, and following up takes time and energy. So is it a sustainable income or just a side hustle material? And that depends how far you want to take it. If you're only supporting a couple of relatives or friends, then yes, it's a side hustle, and you might decide to work through an agency where someone else handles many of the day-to-day admin tasks. But if you do decide to start your own tutoring business and want to rely on it for a sustainable income, be prepared, because there will be moments when you just want to scream and ask the universe, why? The motivation behind tutoring. Why does your why matter when things get tough? And as I've implied in the previous paragraph, there will be times when you just want to go, why? It's a Saturday evening and the family are all meeting up for a family barbecue or sitting down to watch a film, and you would love to join them, but you have to go to lessons. Your son, daughter, niece, nephew, whoever is performing in the school production, you would love to go and watch it, but you've got to go to lessons. You have a million and one things that need to be done, and a family are asking you just to take on one more hour, and you feel as if you're being taken for granted. They've never said thank you. They've never offered you a drink. If you get stuck in traffic and you arrive a second or two late, they expect you to put minutes onto the end to subsidize that. But they never ever acknowledge the times that you're early or add time to the end of the lesson through your own accord. But you feel obliged to go. This is why you need to have such a strong why, a really powerful reason in your mind as to why you'll sacrifice other things for tutoring. Because when it's cold, dark, raining, and you're loading up your car with books and other resources, or when you're driving home from a session feeling drained and wondering if it even made a difference, that why is what will keep you going. It's that quiet voice in your head that reminds you, I'm actually building something, I'm doing something that matters. That child hopefully now feels more confident because of me. Your why becomes your anchor. It pulls you forward when motivation fades, and it's what turns what you do from a job to a purpose. Is tutoring purely transactional or transformational? So, because if you're only tutoring for the money, there will become a point when it's not enough. The late nights, the emotional energy, the time away from your own family, it will start to feel like a burden. But when you're driven by something deeper, a desire to make a difference, to help a child find their confidence again, to give someone the chance they deserve, that's when tutoring becomes transformational, not just for your students, but for you too. Every lesson becomes an opportunity. Every lesson becomes a small win and a breakthrough. And even on the harder days, you'll still know that it's worth it. What kind of tutoring are we talking about? Is it just casual help for friends, or is it exam focused? Is it neurodiverse one-to-one support? It may be that having read this so far, that you're now thinking that tutoring is probably more effort than what you realized it was going to be. It's not quite the easy money that you anticipated. It's not that get rich scheme that you anticipated. So maybe you will say no to helping your neighbour's child. However, before you do, there is a huge difference between supporting one or two children in the short term on a casual basis to get them through their exams than there is to creating a business with the goal of supporting multiple children in the long term. The pros and cons of supporting a family, friends on a casual basis. Okay, so if you're working with just one or two families, you know, on a casual basis, you can potentially be more flexible with your time. So you don't need to cancel your own family events. It may not have the same demands for structured lesson plans and organizations. You're not trying to build a business or a reputation, you're merely just supporting a friend. It may only take a couple of hours a week, leaving you plenty of time to do the things that you want to do, rather than always feeling your time is being dictated by tutoring. And supporting a family member or friend will be more relaxed, as they don't have the same expectations on your shoulders. However, the cons of supporting just a couple of family friends on a casual basis are that they may see it just as helping, and so they don't want to pay you as much, if at all. They may cancel at the last minute or change the schedule more frequently, which, whilst it gives you more flexibility, them changing it makes it harder for you to budget or plan your own time. It's a double-edged sword. And it's often harder to say no to family or friends than it is to an outsider. They will be in your life for a lot longer. And if you don't support them to the standard that they anticipated, the whole family circle will know about it and you'll be the butt of their jokes. So how do different types of tutoring demand different levels of energy, skill, and commitment? So there are so many different types of tutoring that it's inevitable that some will demand more energy than others. A lad I worked with back during lockdown wanted me to give him an exam question, and he would literally just sit there and work on it in time conditions, knowing that there was someone there to help if he had a question. So very little energy, very little effort. Having said that, another lad that I used to go to, he was maybe 5 when I first started going, and his lessons revolved around playing games. We would have to cheer and wave our arms and get really enthusiastic and high energy. But he was brilliant, and I loved working with him. But by the end of the hour, I was exhausted, and it felt like a real high energy workout. Most lessons sit somewhere in the middle of that. And these days, 13 years later, I must admit I prefer the lower energy sessions, even if they involve games and a certain level of enthusiasm. Both lessons required skill and effort, but for each of those lessons and every lesson in between, the requirements to tick those boxes would vary very differently. The myths of tutoring. Myth: if you can teach, you can tutor. Another myth: if you're smart, tutoring will be easy. I'm going to question both of these theories. Several years ago, I had a lady that came to work with me, and she was lovely, and her CV was incredible for the world teaching English as a second language. And she was quite inspirational to talk to as well. But when it came to working one-to-one with a child, she struggled. She was so used to supporting a class of 30 and their generic needs that she found it hard to adapt to working with people as individuals. After the first lesson, I contacted the parents, as I always do, to find out how they'd got on, and they responded that she was a lovely lady, but they wouldn't be continuing. I then contacted the second family to see how they'd got on, and so hopefully offer some positive feedback. And the response was exactly the same as the first family. The third family were on the phone before I had the chance to call them, and they were livid. They'd been looking for and had been promised by myself a tutor who would work with their son as an individual, not as a generic number. And apparently she'd come in, started teaching, knew nothing about him and his expectations, and just expected him to follow along and keep up. Apparently it'd been a nightmare. Obviously, that was the end of her employment with us, just because she didn't fit our model. And I've also found that over the decade that some of the most intelligent people that have inquired about tutoring have also been some of the worst tutors. They're brilliant and, again, incredibly inspiring to listen to. But because they see it as common sense, they find it harder to break it into smaller chunks and explain it to the child in a way that makes sense to them. So it doesn't matter how long it takes. What is important is that you, as a teacher, are speaking that student's language. Okay, so some honest pros and cons. What are the fulfilling parts of tutoring? Tutoring is a privilege, and I have met some really incredible, inspiring people as a consequence of tutoring. When reports come out or exam results come out, you feel so proud of the difference that you've made. Sometimes it will just be a small win, or even the other day, I had my last lesson with a young girl. She's just turned 13, and she said, "Thank you for helping me with my maths this year." And it seems really insignificant, but the fact that it came from a child who hates maths, completely unprompted from a parent, it really meant a lot. And I've shared this feedback before, but this is one of the kindest messages I've ever received. You just read it. "Hi, Dawn. I'm so sorry for not replying sooner. I've not been very well, and I'm afraid I've not been able to keep up with my emails. I think all the stress of trying to get F through his exams caught up with me as soon as he finished. I wanted to say a huge, ginormous thank you for everything you've done for F. You've helped him so much in his maths and English, but for him, it's more than that. Before starting with you, he was in a really bad place. He felt education wasn't for him, and he had no hope of passing or achieving anything. But by teaching him maths in a way he understood, he started to believe he wasn't totally stupid, and maybe he could pass. And then that spiraled. As he got better at maths, he started thinking he could do other things, and it's really changed his whole outlook. I never thought I'd be sitting with him discussing A levels, let alone considering going to college after sixth form to study computing. He is like a different person. The exam period was not easy, but now the stress has gone. He's much easier to live with and is enjoying his life of leisure. He wanted me to ask you if there was any way he could leave a review for you, as he wanted to say thank you and tell other people how good you were for him. So a huge thank you from all of us, and we will let you know how he gets on. I hope you have a wonderful summer." He got a level 8 and went on to do A-level maths, where he got an A. What are the tough parts? There are times when you feel like you're banging your head against a brick wall. The child is using games as an excuse to throw the dice across the room, to doodle on the game, creating their own snakes and ladders, when you sit there for an hour on a boiling hot day and the family gets the child a drink, but you're not offered one, when they're late paying you or you log on and turn up and they've forgotten all about it and now they have different plans. Days like these, you just ask yourself why. Often I think when it gets to this point with a family, you just need to be strong and tell them that you don't think you're going to be the right tutor for their child. Draw the line in the sand and move on, because if you don't, you will start to resent every child that you work with, because you'll just fall out of love with the role. But when does tutoring feel like easy money and when doesn't it? It can feel like easy money when you're working with a child who is responsive, who you get on with and they respond well, when you feel that the family appreciate you and the effort that you're putting in. There was one family I went to for years, and the mum would come and sit down with us and say, Dawn, sorry to interrupt, but can I ask you a question? And she would ask me something about revision or a certain part of maths or something about supporting her dyslexic son. And because it's something I do every day, it's something I can chat about all day. And it didn't feel like work. It felt as if I was just sat there chatting with friends. And then there are families who would give you food and drinks. I used to go to 3 families. The dads of each of the families were brothers. And I'd get to the first home and she'd give me a drink. When I arrived at the second home, they'd give me a drink and a dessert. And then by the time I got to the third house, they'd be giving me a drink, a main course, and a dessert. It was as if the 3 families were competing to be the most generous. It was really fantastic. But then there are also families that you bend over backwards for, and you feel in their eyes it's not enough. The more you give, the more they expect. You feel as if you could give blood and they would still expect more. And these are generally the ones that don't offer you a drink or are the last to pay you. Your efforts are just taken for granted, and often it's because they've had nothing to compare your style with. And so they just presume that what you're doing is what every tutor does. And it's just the expected norm. Can I suggest you take a self-assessment before you begin? So what questions should you ask yourself before you decide if tutoring is right for you? Before you decide to become a tutor, I would sit down and ask yourself, why? Why am I doing this? Am I doing this for the money or because I care about helping kids grow? Do I understand what it takes beyond the lesson itself? Are you tutoring because you believe it would be easy money? And as I've adhered to, yes, it can be, but like everything else, the more you put into it, the more you'll get out of it. And I'm guessing the fact that you've read this far, it's an indicator that you're in it for more than just the money. And to be honest, you need a deeper reason why, because tutoring takes place on an evening and at weekends when everyone else in your family is probably at home relaxing or out socializing. And for you, it means your time will be spent at work. And are you willing to sacrifice your leisure time? Have a long think about why you want to become a tutor. Is it because you have a passion for the subject and you want to share your knowledge and your passion with others? Is it because you've enjoyed working with your own children and you want to take that enjoyment now and make it into a business? Do you see what's happening in schools and think that so many children are needing extra support? You want to do something about it to help? Your motivation will no doubt change over time, but what is driving you today? Will it still inspire you on the days when the going gets tough? Yes, there can be money in tutoring, but the real richness comes from the impact that you can make to someone who's been struggling and now sees the logic, on occasions even enjoys the challenge. The child who passes the exam and gets into the course they wanted or just never wants to study the subject again. For the child who no longer falls behind all their peers in the weekly test, leaving them feeling inadequate. So is tutoring easy money? For some, maybe, but for those who care deeply and want to make a real difference, it's so much more than that. It's preparation, persistence, and heart. It's building trust, showing up, and quietly transforming lives, including your own. If you're wondering whether tutoring could be the right next step for you, not just an income, but the impact, you don't need to have all the answers, you just need to start. I've added a link at the bottom to our Start Tutoring with Confidence pack. if you're interested, feel free to click and find out more.